Good morning. Today, our guest for the UNA Poland Speaker Series is Her Excellency Minister Lee Andersson, Minister of Education of the Republic of Finland. Minister, thank you very much for joining us, and good morning.
Good morning. Very nice to be able to join you.
Thank you. I do want to get us started off with talking obviously about the Finnish education system. The Finnish education system, which is seen as one of the role models around the world in many countries. And the very simple question for the start that I wanted to ask you is, what is the reason for this success? Why do you think, and what aspects of the Finnish education system make it so unique?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's a very good and important question to start with. And firstly, of course, I also want to thank you for the interest that you're showing in the Finnish education system. So it's very nice to have the possibility to attend this discussion. I think one of the main reasons for success is firstly that in Finland, at a very early stage, I think understood the importance of investing in people and investing in human resources. And if we look at the development in Finland, just some 100 years ago, Finland was one of the least developed countries in Europe. It was also a very poor and rural country. And now if we look at how we're performing at the moment, we're usually in the top 10 in many global welfare rankings that are done between different countries in the world. And one of the most crucial reasons why this transformation was possible was that Finland invested heavily in education and also heavily emphasized the role of equality in education, which means that we wanted to build an education system that was common for all. And that also gives opportunities for students, no matter from what background you come, if you come from a poor family or a rich family, no matter what your mother tongue is, gave equal opportunities for all to participate in education and to educate themselves. And also, if we look at our education system at the moment, we're still heavily emphasizing the role of equality, also in the sense that no educational choice can lead to any closed doors in our education system, but students always have the possibility to continue on with their studies. On top of this, a third point I would like to make in this regard is the role of teachers, which has been emphasized in many international studies and surveys that has been done around the Finnish education model, that one of the key success factors is that the teacher's profession is very highly valued. It's also an attractive profession, which means that there's a lot of students who apply to become teachers every year. And all teachers have a master's degree from the university, so they are all highly educated, and that's why we can also trust them to know how to perform their work at a very good level. So the role of teacher is also very central for our system.
It definitely seems that it's very much rooted within the Finnish society, the belief in education and how indeed important that is. And I think, as you say, that then has a direct effect on the quality of the system and the education behind us. So that is really good to hear. Diving a little bit more into detail, we know that one of the more differentiating aspects of the Finnish education model is the fact that the curriculum is it's more or less open in the sense that it can be adapted to local circumstances and to local aspects. And that, to me, is a great example of fit to the external environment, organizational fit as well. And what would you say would the significance of that be, and how was that actually possible to achieve as well? Just like in my first question, because this is not something that you see in other places around the world, and it's definitely something that if we were to propose, for example, here in Poland, I can see many hurdles would have to be jumped over.
Well, in sense of the curriculum and the decentralization as a feature in the Finnish education system, it is true that we have a fairly decentralized system, and we do not do standardized testing at the national level or school ranking or assessments of this kind. We do have a process where we do, on a national level, a national core curriculum that is then being implemented on a local level, so that on a local level, education providers, teachers together make up the local curriculum. And I think the system has worked very well, actually. I think some of the features that are important to emphasize in terms of the Finnish process is that if we talk about the national core curriculum, it's not really a subject for political debate, but it's done by education experts, people who are working in the education field, and it's prepared through an open and collaborative process where researchers and teachers and other stakeholders participate. And then the local curriculum is a bit more flexible as a tool also, because it enables you to have some local emphasis and also take into account some local circumstances when drawing up your strategic and pedagogical tool for leading the work in schools. This system has been developed for quite a long time, several decades. And I think if I look at the educational field, I think most people are quite happy with how it works at the moment. We're also trying not to reform the curriculum too often, which is also important, really for changes to have time to also be implemented on a local level. And of course, this whole model is again very much dependent on the fact that teachers have qualifications from the universities, so they also have the means and tools necessary to participate in this work on a local level in their own schools.
Stability and adaptation are the two words that definitely pop into my mind when I hear what you speak of with regards to the model, and that is something that I get very happy and excited about, because I think that is something that really could. There are places that could use that as a model and indeed as a lesson. You mentioned national testing and the fact that you don't necessarily have national testing per se, and that nicely links with my next question, because for us here in Poland and many other countries around the world, where the final national examination at high school is the most important aspect of your entire educational journey. And what would you say is the main advantage of having a system whereby national testing doesn't play such a great importance, but rather you really do put a lot of attention on student development, personal development, and this practical approach to education? And what, in your eyes, would you say the advantage of that idea would be in comparison to, for example, a model where the exam and your grade is the most important aspect?
Well, I mean, of course, it's always difficult to compare systems in different countries, because all countries and all educational systems have their own specific national features. But if you look at the Finnish system, as I said, we do not have standard testing in basic education, primary education. We do not upkeep national ranking systems either, or different kind of school inspections. So I would say on one part that the whole system is very much based on trust, which means both trust in teachers and trust in local education providers in the municipalities. Trust which is also possible to build through the system of or through the high educational background of the teachers. We do, of course, assess quality in education in different ways, but it's usually done with sample-based studies and not through standardized testing. So there is, of course, tools and means through which we can evaluate quality. But basically, I would say that assessment, like the whole pedagogical thinking in Finland, is that it should be a national part of the daily schoolwork. So it's a part of the relationship also between the teacher and the student. So assessment is meant to kind of encourage you and to give you tools for your learning. And I think in some countries, at least, you can see maybe a bit of a problematic development if there is very much focus on studying for tests or studying for standardized tests instead of kind of emphasizing the joy and motivation of every learner and for learning in all. And also, personally, in many international forums, I have emphasized that at least in the latest PISA studies, the differences between schools in terms of learning outcomes were the smallest in Finland. So it is possible to build a system based on broad quality and quality in every schools, also without this type of standardized testing. But the problem with ranking lists is usually that parents and children start to compare schools, and you might see some very problematic developments also where teachers and children are trying to select the best school for themselves, which then will lead to a development where differences between schools and learning outcomes grow bigger.
Indeed, absolutely. I mean, thank you very much for all those insights, because this indeed can later serve as food for thought in other places. Having in mind the fact that we cannot necessarily compare one-to-one country X to country Y, like you mentioned, because of all the different externalities. Right now, the world is grappling with the pandemic, as we all know, and education has widely been interrupted. Has been widely affected in many places around the world. And I wanted to ask, how has that been in Finland? How has the education been affected in Finland, and what was the response of the Finnish government?
Well, in Finland we also had a lockdown, so we closed the school facilities for a period of around 2 months in spring, regarding both upper secondary level and primary education. But the youngest students were exempted, so they had the possibility to attend classes in school if they wanted to. But the vast majority of all students, also in primary education, were studying from home using digital learning environments and distance learning. And it was quite challenging in a way, because the shift was done basically in 24 hours. So we basically did something that we have never done before in the whole history of Finnish primary education, which was using a remote learning completely in terms of the primary education. But I think what it showed in Finland, I said it showed both innovation and inequality. So there were kind of like different results and trend that we could see. We have already during previous years invested quite heavily in digital competences for teachers and also in digital learning environments. So I would say that if you look at the infrastructure, it was well in place in Finland, and a lot of teachers have also spoken that they found new ways in terms of teaching, and were able also to find new innovative ways of teaching in collaboration with their colleagues. The main concern, as I said, was that because children come from very different circumstances, so also differences in terms of your home conditions, how much your parents can support you in your learning. These types of differences also were more visible during the distance learning period. And now, as we have returned to contact teaching since May, we have also given more resources for the municipalities to use for investing in additional teaching for students who need it, and also for investing in the well-being of students, because we know that the differences between students and this kind of polarization has grown since the spring. And now at the moment, we are still in contact teaching, still enacting contact teaching in primary education as well as in upper secondary. But of course, it's quite, we have given certain instructions around how schoolwork should be organized to limit close contacts between students during the day. And also some municipalities have given out recommendations to use masks on upper secondary level. So of course, it's still quite a challenging time for the education sector, and it still demands also a lot of attention, both in terms of learning outcomes, teaching, and also in terms of the more general well-being of children and youth.
Absolutely, it's indeed very challenging and definitely requires adaptability, as we mentioned earlier. I am looking at the clock, so I don't want to take too much more of your time. So I'll move on to my very last question, which is very much about the future, because the pandemic and the fact that we moved to this digital learning environment has once again sparked the discussion about where the future of education actually is, and whether or not technology will, to what extent technology will actually replace certain aspects of education that we know today in, say, 10, 15, or 20 years. And the question is very simple. The answer might not be. How do you see the future of education in 10, 15, or 20 years? Where do you think we will be in that amount of time?
Well, I hope that in 10 or 20 years, in all countries, in all over the world, actually, I hope that education will have a more prominent role, both in terms of the public debate, but also in terms of public investment. I think that at that point, we have already understood that with everything that's happening in terms of technological developments in the labor market, that we need to heavily invest in education for all people of all ages, also in terms of the of adult population, working population that also need possibilities to reskill and upskill. So education is really the best tool we have as a nation to make sure that we are resilient and that we're also prepared to face different types of changes that can happen at very quick pace, as the pandemic now shows really that education is key in terms of the resilience of society. The role of technology in education, I think technology has absolutely, it's come to stay in our society, so it has also come to stay in terms of education. But one of the biggest questions that we have to be able to answer to has to do with equality and technological development, and how we are able to kind of at the same time make sure that the main guiding principle, for example, behind the Finnish education model around equality and equity, giving everybody possibilities no matter what background you come from, how we are able to combine that principle with using more technological tools and more digital learning environments, since we're now seeing a clear, how would I say, there is like a tension between the two, at least in terms of if you look at our experiences from this year.
Indeed, I would definitely say that technology has a great role to play as far as lowering socioeconomic as well inequalities among society, rather than deepening them, which can be the case. And there are different scenarios and different examples that can be named. Thank you very much for this discussion. It was a great pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing all the insights. It was very interesting to hear about how education is done in Finland, which is very different to Poland and many other places around the world. I think our listeners will have a lot of food for thought after today's discussion. And I wish you all the very best. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and all the best to you in Poland as well.
Thank you very much.